Hi there, you're watching AC's 8-Bit Zone. I received a special package this week in the mail. So a channel subscriber contacted me and said he has this CoCo-2 he's had for many years. He pulled it out of storage about 4 years ago and found that the video display wasn't working. So we talked back and forth by email and we decided that it would be perfect to bring it on over to AC's 8-Bit Zone and let me diagnose it here. So this video is all about trying to discover what's wrong with this CoCo-2. So let's take a look at the letter from the channel subscriber. His name's Gonzalo. Hello there, thanks for replying to my comment. I belong to an old retro computing group in Facebook. Several of us have had a problem with CoCos that has so far not been solved in a methodological documented way. Okay, typical recommendations are reseat all the chips, change all the caps. So he did all those things that he could and it still wasn't working. So let's get this CoCo on the bench and see what's wrong with it. Package made it in fine shape. Hopefully there was no damage in shipping. Oh yeah, he did a good job packing this. I'm gonna keep that box for the return trip. And there we are. Yeah, he's taken good care of this old color computer too. Okay, so this has the original Radio Shack badge instead of the Tandy badge. And it has the full stroke keyboard. Let's see what model number this is. It's 263127. While it was on its way to me, I looked up this model number. This was the first true 64K color computer 2. The earlier models, I think they started with 26-30. They were 16K and they were upgradable to 64K. But this was the earliest model that came with 64K already installed. Looks like the warranty label has already been compromised. I'm sure he opened it up at some point to see if there was something obvious wrong that he could service. Why don't we open this case now? Alright, yes, and it has the earlier RF modulator that stands vertically on the board. I talked about that in one of my earlier videos about servicing the RF modulator and then converting it and modding it for S-video. A few of these ICs are actually socketed. We have the VDG, the 6847, it's socketed. Here's the 6822, also with socket. One of the smaller logic chips socketed there. And we have, what are these, the two ROMs? They're in socket. And the processor, here's the CPU 6809 in a socket. And just under here, we have the 74LS783 also in a socket. The RAM on this board is in a line down here. It's not socketed. Some of the date codes on some of these ICs are 1984. Here's the 47th week of 1984 on these RAMs. Looks like all the ones that I can see here are the same date code. 34th week of 84, 40th week of 84, So it looks like this computer was most likely built in late 1984, probably just in time for the Christmas holiday. Well, let's go ahead and power this on and connect it to the TV and see what the display looks like. All right, let's see what kind of display we get. Don't suppose there's any chance that it fixed itself during shipping. So we're still probably going to have to find the problem and fix it. All right, let's see what we have. Let's see, I think it's set for channel 3. The TV's set for 3. The computer was on 3 already. Okay, here we go. Okay, so it's mainly green, but there's some blockiness in some areas, and there's some thin striping of some other shades of green as well. I think in one of the photos that he showed me before, there was some blockiness of orange and green, sort of a mix. So definitely not good. Let's see what happens if we power on a couple of times. Do we ever get a different problem? Okay, basically an all green screen. Okay. Looked like for a moment it was going to be a little bit different, but still just all green. Okay. Reset. All right. I think the next thing I'll do is get the case and the keyboard out of the way so that I can get more access to the chips. So there's a modification here. There's a couple of resistors. These keyboard connectors can be a little tight on first removal, so I like to just give it a little bit of lubrication so not to do less damage that way. Okay, we're not going to need the case or keyboard for a while. Now we'll get some of the clips out of the way and the shields and covers. Oh, haven't seen that before with the bulk capacitors on the back of the board. The next thing that I did is I moved those two bulk capacitors to the front side of the board. There's going to be a lot of handling of the board and probing coming up, so I really don't want to bend the board or break one of the capacitors off. So now the board can rest very flat on the bench, and now I want to figure out what's going on with these two resistors. What exactly is connected here, and what's going on? So there are a pair of vias here, and this resistor's connecting to pin 1 of a RAM, and this resistor is connecting up to what's either ground or VCC on this decoupling cap. So are these resistors being used as data pull up or pull down resistances? Okay, to determine what these vias connect to, let's go have a look at the service manual for the early Color Computer 2, one of the 263026s. This will be close enough to this version of the board, I think, to get us in the ballpark. Okay, so the two vias in question are right at the top of U17 there. Here are the corresponding vias just above U17, and following them up, we find there this pin and this pin, which are pins 36 and 35 on U7. What's U7? U7 is the 6822 PIA chip, and 36 and 35 are address 0 and address 1. Okay, so not data pins, but address pins. Okay, let's find out if that is VCC or ground. Okay, so the left side of that decoupling cap, okay, it must be VCC. That's ground, so that would be VCC. And let's see if this is the same. Okay, they're both pull-ups to VCC on address line 0 and 1. Okay, that's right, because pin 1 of the RAM was connected to VCC. Okay, and the value is, it's a red, black, orange, which is a 103 or a 10K ohm. Let's confirm that as 10K. That's 10K. And that one's 10K. Okay, so I am not totally sure whether these were done at the factory or if these were done later. But if you look at this resistor compared to these over here, these are also 10Ks. Look right here. Brown, black, orange, gold. And then over here, brown, black, orange, gold. These components really look identical in coloring and marking, so it's likely that these came from the factory, but again, I just am not sure. I have another board very similar to this one, another couple of them, and I know one of them does not have those resistors, and the other board I don't think I've had out of the case and looked very closely, but I don't think either of my boards have these resistors. Taking another look at my board, mine's also drawing number 1700-235, and the number up there matches, but I have rev blank. This diode, these two diodes here, CR5 and CR6, were actually kludged in place. They didn't have official homes on the board and silk screening in the location numbers. So I think my board is maybe first rev, and this was something that was done on later versions of the PCB. And in any case, I don't believe that 10K pull-up resistors on a couple of address lines is going to have anything to do with the problem we're seeing on this board. So I think this is okay. Alright, it's time to come up with a plan of initial attack here. So Some of the most important chips are the ones that are outlined here. We have the 6809 CPU, we have the 6883 synchronous address multiplexer, we have color basic ROM and extended color basic ROM, and you have to have at least the left ROM in place, and the right one is optional. We have the 6847 video display generator. We have PIAs 6821 and 6822. PIAs are the peripheral interface adapters, and they do things such as controlling the serial ports, the cassette ports, and joystick ports, reading the keyboard keys that are pressed. They also have, this one, the 6821, has some connections to the 555 artifact circuit and to the VDG. So it influences the modes of the VDG by providing some I/O signals over there to him. And then obviously the DRAM here at the bottom. It's 8 chips. Each chip is for 1 bit of the 8-bit data bus, and I believe this is the least significant bit on the left with U14 and the most significant bit in U21. So the CPU, of course, starts all the activities. It's going to read ROM, and then the synchronous address multiplexer is going to decode accesses to the ROMs and the various other chips, such as ROM, RAM, the PIA, and then the CPU is going to render a video image by storing data in RAM, and the VDG, or video display generator, is going to read RAM and create video signals to send over to the RF modulator, which is the shiny box here. So these are definitely the major chips. We'll also mention some of the other ICs that are on the board. Okay, so we have the supply and level translation chip. The SALT chip is responsible for regulating the 5-volt logic supply for the entire board, and it also shifts some voltage levels for the negative voltages that are required on the RS-232 serial port. Now the board is mainly powering up, and it looks like a lot is working to get the image that we're seeing on the board. So I don't think the 5-volt supply is in error, but we'll definitely be checking that just to make sure. And we're not worried about the serial port at this time. So there's also the reset circuit. Now it seems like it is coming out of reset because we're getting a little bit more than a blank screen. But we'll double check reset is not being held low for some reason. Now this set of NOR gates in the IC that's sort of hidden by the RF modulator, as well as the 74LS138 decoder, are very important in the chip selecting logic for the board. So they're helper chips to the SAM for decoding and selecting chip enables for ROM, RAM, and some of the data buffers that are over here. So the RAM is not read directly by any of the chips on the board. It actually goes through a 244 pass-through buffer and a 273 latch. So these chips are deeply involved in getting the correct data in and out of the video chip, because the video chip will only be able to see the data through the data bus, and so these chips are critical, and we'll have to check those. The 555 timer is involved in the artifact circuit, and it's probably not involved in the issue on this board. It could do things like call corrupt the synchronization. It could corrupt the horizontal or vertical sync. It could cause blank images. It can actually cause the yellow bars on the left side of the screen. That's another issue that we've seen. I don't think it's a culprit in this case. And then there's the 77526 and the 77526 having to do with I/O. It's not something we're going to look at immediately. So out of all of these helper chips, definitely the data buffers need to be working, and the decoding logic needs to be right. So thinking about what's going on here in the corrupted display, I'm really suspicious of the synchronous address multiplexer. Is it failing and not refreshing RAM? So one of the jobs, probably the main job of the SAM, is to provide RAS and CAS cycles to keep refreshing the DRAM so that it doesn't lose its memory. And a secondary function is to provide decoding logic for chip selects. So I'm very suspicious of the SAM and his helper chips, the NOR gates and the 138 decoder. I think I'm also suspicious of the video display generator, and of course there's always RAM. There may even be something wrong with the data bus where one of these ROMs is misoperating, and maybe it's stepping on the data bus, so we're going to have to check that as well. So at this point we don't suspect that the 5 volt rail has a problem, but let's go ahead and check some voltages around the board just to rule this out. And we'll probably also take a look at the reset circuit and just make sure that reset is not asserted or being toggled. And about these bulk caps that I moved from the back side of the board to the front, they're probably placed back there to prevent them from getting cooked by the heatsink on the 5 volt regulator. So we'll move those back before we're finished, towards the end. But just for the short time that the board is going to be powered on, these caps shouldn't see much heat from this supply. But this gets really hot later if you've left it on for a few minutes. Okay, so power on. 4.97 volts. Looking good. Okay, and I mean, this will rule out that there could be a broken trace on the power rail somewhere, or there could be a cold solder joint on power. Let's just make sure all our ICs are getting VCC, and we won't have to worry about that. Looks good. 4.96. 4.96. 4.96. Looks like I forgot to mark this one. Let's just see if we have a corner pin. Okay, there's 4.96. That's probably the P5. 4.96. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, on the 6847, it's the 4th pin up, pin 17. 4.96. A couple of the pins of the RAMs are connected to VCC. Just quickly check all of those. LS02, that's the NOR gates. 74LS138 decoder. ROM 1 and ROM 2 all have VCC. And obviously these major chips are getting VCC, or we wouldn't have had nearly as much working as it is. Pin 7. Okay, on the processor. Yeah, that's all good. You can also find P5 on this inductor. Okay. All right. Power rail looks good. Okay, so let's pause right there. We've covered a lot of ground, and the video was about to explode and just become way too long. So let's pause it right there, and I promise video number 2, part 2 of this series will be up in just a few days. And in that video, we find out exactly what's wrong with this CoCo-2. So hope you enjoyed this so far. It's going to get better in the next episode. So that's all for today, but come back for the next one just a few days from now. And until then, have a great week. Bye.